So I noticed someone commented on my old DPC Plus Street Fight World game that I had worked on, and you know, I had a lot of fun working on it. That was about 6 or 7 years ago, and I never finished it. So I started working on a second version of the game that did not require the DPC Plus chip. And you know, the DPC Plus chip is, well, it's kind of like if you were to put a Android in a cartridge and then just make it, you know, do whatever an Android computer could do. You're just, you know, it's kind of cheating. This is kind of a joke beginning screen that I put on this game to be like a Neo Geo game, where Neo Geo games tout their megabyte size and all that stuff before you actually get into the game. And this is a game I'm working on now. This is the emulator, and this is on an HD screen, so this might be indicative of what you will see on the Atari 2600 Plus if you put it on, which is, I guess it's HD, okay. And these are the newer style graphics that I've been working on. These backgrounds are tentative, and they're really just placeholders, and they use the Super Chip slightly higher resolution backgrounds. I'll probably be using totally different backgrounds for the game so that I can have more character moves and more graphics dedicated to the characters. So as you see these backgrounds moving through, these are not like a final background for this game, although you know, it's not far from what I'm going to be trying to do. So there's hit bars up there, as you can see, and I might actually go ahead and raise this camera slightly. Let's see if I can't fit that in there. Okay, there, that's pretty good right there. That's a good good view. So the characters can move. I haven't put the animation frames in yet for their walking or any of the attacks or anything, but the attack does work. So I've showed this before, but if I go in here and hit the button, you can see that took damage off. Now the damage is set for one screen at a time. So because this is set in kind of a slideshow mode, the damage doesn't actually react the way it would in the real game. It's just to kind of practice and to show how the demo actually works. And there are several characters programmed onto each of them. So see, I can move over to this guy here, or this guy. He's just a color variant. Okay. So this is kind of an SNK King of Fighters style game. And I wanted the characters to be very detailed and have lots of color. And you have my version of Terry Bogard. I'm calling him Barry Togard. And I've got my Sharanui is going to be Shai Maranui. Just kind of switching the letters around their names. And I really like them. When I flesh out the characters, there's going to be, you know, a limited move set. I obviously I can't just you know, jam pack it with every move that these games could have, because this is going to be a 32K cartridge, and you know, 32K is not much. So I have to be very careful. And like with the DPC Plus Street Fight World game that I was making, the question was raised on the AtariAge website. How do you put this on an Atari? And it must have been mockingly, just, you know, for fun. It was a picture of Ryu, however you want to pronounce the name, from Street Fighter 2. And I came in and said, okay, first off, we need to shrink him so he'll fit. And I said eight 8 pixels wide is not enough. Let's see if we can fit them in 16 pixels wide. And so I came up with the method of cutting the character in half and then painting 8 pixels, one half of the character on the screen, and then in a second instance painting the other 8 pixels to make a 16 pixel wide character. And with the advantage of better looking graphics, it also raised some concerns with alignment and things. The characters didn't align properly. Sometimes there was a line through the character, things like that. So over the years, I've come up with new methods of creating graphics on the Atari 2600, and this is using those methods where you have essentially a 3-color sprite, and it's not rows of color like what you would see on certain Atari graphics, maybe like the bad guys on Hero or something like that. Those are layered where there's a row of color per line of what would be the sprite. It's obviously not a single color sprite, at least not on the surface, but I've got a method now where you have 3-color sprites and you can have all the colors everywhere. So my new Street Fighter World game, Street Fight World, is slightly different. I'll go ahead and I haven't put that up here yet. I've been working on the SNK one, but again, the Street Fight World came up, so I'm working on that one now. And what I'm hoping to do is have Street Fight World finished so that it can be released for the 2600 plus. I've got this stupid end definition popping up, which is completely not applicable. Okay, so this is the new Street Fight World using this type of graphics. Okay, this is just a kind of a title screen placeholder, and all right. So now with these are zoomed slightly, and you can see that that's Guile and Chun-Li. Just like with the other game, these are tentative, lower resolution backgrounds. I'm probably going to limit the total number of backgrounds so that I'll have more ROM space. You have very limited ROM space for graphics, even with bank switching. With bank switching, you're cycling through banks to be able to have up to 32, with certain modified cartridges up to 64K of ROM space. But the system itself can only really deal with a small amount of. It has a very small amount of RAM that it's dealing with. So to get as much out of it as possible, then I'm going to have to change the backgrounds. I really like this background based on Ken's background. Now you can kind of see some ghosting, and that's more visible in the emulator than on an actual TV. On a TV, the ghosting is almost non-existent. These are with adjusted color palettes to work better on the TV. And of course, every bit of this is going to be tested on HD TV, old CRTs, new CRTs, Rainbow Juniors, 4-switchers, Vader 4-switcher, Rainbow Junior, as many different systems as I can. I've got Flashback 9, Flashback 2, all kinds of systems. I want to have a good idea of what this game's going to look good on and how it's going to look on. What it's being, mainly programmed for is to be played on an original system on a CRT, just like the old days. So I'm not programming these things intending it to only be played on an emulator or only be played on a modern system, although the inspiration to try to finish this game and get it out the door is the 2600 plus. And I've noticed people are complaining about the 2600 plus. why make it, why buy it, what good is it, and you know, all these other questions arising about the system. Well, first off, they said, well, there are easy ways to just put your classic 2600 on an HD TV. Well, I haven't seen any way to do that where it looks any good. And my TV has coaxial input, so I have plugged Atari directly into this TV, and it supposedly has filters to help to control the output, and no matter what I do, it looks like crap. So I'm sure there are some kind of, you know, adapters or something you can use to plug in your classic system and have it go straight into your HD TV and whoop-de-doo. But those don't cover 7800. So, you know, how am I going to play Atari? Well, it could be on a 7800, on a CRT, on an original system on a CRT. Those are my first choices, is going to be on a CRT TV screen. But I would like to have a decent option for playing Atari on a HD TV. Now that the 2600 Plus is going to be HDMI out primarily, and it's going to be 7800 and 2600, I think it's a great idea. I don't think it's a bad idea at all to do that. And I think that if they get it, if it's a fast enough system, you know, someone complained online, this is just going to be another Stella emulator, and why don't they make it a field programmable gate array? Okay, and I think everyone is drinking the field programmable gate array, okay, because a field programmable gate array is great because it is the chip. It's the original chip. Where it's not great is that emulators have all kinds of enhancements. And suppose you're playing a Super Nintendo game and then you give it like an Eagle 2 XA or XIA or whatever, SIA, SAI, these like multipliers where all of the edges, essentially it's anti-aliasing for a 16-bit video game, okay? Those can make those games look like hand-drawn cartoon art and comic art, stuff like that. It really, some people like the enhancements that you can give through emulation. So I don't think it's bad that the 2600 Plus is going to be an emulation system and not a field programmable gate array or an FPGA chip. I think that in that particular case, an FPGA chip might be a waste of time. I don't think there's a really great, you know, I don't think they're hard to get, you know. It's essentially just, what is it, like a crippled 6502 or something like that. It's not a rare chip. Now, if we were dealing with a Coco 3, which needs FPGA replacement chips before the majority of those systems kill themselves, because once their chip dies, the system is essentially broken. Much like the timekeeper chip in a CDI, these are systems that must have some type of option created to preserve them. But I think that, you know, paying $500 for a field programmable gate array Sega Genesis, I think is ridiculous. Because like what they're saying about the 2600, there are cheap options now to just pipe that straight through your HD TV, and so it's somewhat ridiculous to go that far. Now if you bought one, whatever, that's great. My point is, I think the 2600 Plus is a great idea, because even if it is emulation, if it is a fast enough system to paint the graphics up on the screen and not flicker or shimmer or mess up or anything, then that opens the door for people to program games that will look really, really good on HD TV. And that's where I'm coming in with this. And this game will look good on a normal TV. Like I said, the ghosting won't really be on a normal TV. So, and this is using a filter that makes it a little more TV-like. It's not just you know, whatever, pixels. This is using a filter. So these are my new graphics for Street Fight World. I like how they turned out. I think after some work, see, here's like Blanca. After some work, this game's going to look really super good. Like I said, the backgrounds are tentative. I'm going to probably add my own different backgrounds. I'd like to change the game around a little bit. These were all from several years ago when I first started making a new version of Street Fighter World that didn't require the DPC Plus chipset. Which, you know, I know there are a lot of really good users on AtariAge, but there are also a lot of really snobby code Nazis, I guess. They're kind of like, they've got an answer for everything and they know it all, and you don't really have a place there, and it's their exclusive little group. And once they decide you mean nothing, they ignore you, and they pretty much can treat you like crap. And you know, there have been all kinds of problems with people making games and being treated like crap on that website. So DPC Plus I was aiming for because it lets you have more sprites, but you can also do more sprites with other kernels. You don't have to be using that. And I decided, you know, the purist in me, and also just saying I don't want to rely on them for their fancy DPC Plus, which it's not really a DPC Plus chip. It's an ARM chip. It's an ARM processor that is allowing the programming environment to create a DPC Plus game from that kernel, giving you more sprites, and but you still have most of the same limitations. Now the super chip lets you have higher resolution backgrounds, and it looks a lot better. Like, you can do a lot more with it. The multi-sprite kernel will let you use more sprites, up to 5. Not as many as the DPC Plus, but enough. The standard kernel with super chip will let you have really good looking sprites. With certain little tricks, you can get great looking games. Now, I wanted to make Street Fighter World for DPC Plus. Prior to that, I had made Runout, which is a Outrun clone, kind of sightseeing driving game. And that was what I wanted, was to try to support that with their little ARM processor DPC Plus chipset. Now I'm focusing on chips that were from the era. And so these games do not use chips that are modern. They use the super chip from the 80s. They use the normal 32K bank switching chips from the 80s. They use the same PCB board designs from the 80s. They don't require anything, you know, any kind of, and you know, there are games now, and I'm not saying I really have a problem with people using whatever modern chips and stuff, but again, purity's out the window when you do that. I mean, what if you just program a game to run on some advanced tiny chip, you know, and then you're just putting that in a Sega cartridge, and that's been done, or putting it in an Atari cartridge or whatever cartridge, that's different. You know, that's not making something better with what there was. And so this is Street Fighter World, the more modern version, using the older original chips, only with better graphics. And in my opinion, the graphics are a lot better. I'm also working on other things. This is kind of a beginning of a role-playing game, or not, more like a Zelda kind of game, codenamed Melba. And this is using some types of graphics to show some more higher resolution backgrounds, and I could have more colors and have a little character that could run around on the screen and you know, zap things with a sword. Now this is a little lower resolution than what I started with. I was, of course, running out of ROM space really fast. And when you end up with, you know, 24 to 28K of ROM space to fill in with code, you can do a lot with that. So really, the test here is using as small amount of graphics as possible in the most creative way possible. So with Atari, when you see people trying to make games that are, you know, a little too advanced, which I got told that Titan X was too much. It was just too much. It was, I don't know if they tried to mean that it was too ambitious or what. Now, I'm remaking Titan X with this newer graphics method. So my Titan X graphics will all be better. They're not going to be rows of color. They're not going to be single color sprites or rows of color. They're going to be 3 color sprites that actually look like video game sprites. They're going to be slightly higher resolution backgrounds but less backgrounds. The original Titan X game had 64 different backgrounds. It had, you know, almost a dozen, I think a dozen bad guys, something like that. It had a ton of secret hidden passageways, and it's a great game. I still play Titan X. And I made it, of course, so I'm partial to the game. I love the game, but my son also says it's his favorite Atari game, and he loves it. And I put a lot of time and effort into it. Titan X takes up every bit of a 32K bank switching card. And it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy the game. But I'm going to make Titan X more like my original vision of the game for this newer way of programming. Now, it might still be a 32K bank switching cartridge, but it also might end up being a super chip game. So another game. Here's the Ghost or Bust game that I'm working on, which I'd love to get finished. I'd like to probably get it done soon. I mean, I want it to be maybe next year Halloween release. Halloween would be a great time to let the game out. And here you can see I'm playing this with a keyboard, so it's really not as easy. This guy doesn't want to, I'm going to have to go in there and change him a little, because he doesn't want to stop. He had that problem earlier. Okay, here you can see the driving scene with the ghost. And again, like I talk about this later, but he will be, as you speed up, he'll come towards the car, then you can hit the button to vacuum him into the car, the Ecto 1. Okay, there's the first scene with Slimer and Peter and Winston. There's some ghosting on Winston's graphics that you can't see on a CRT. You can't see that on original hardware CRTs. And you know, again, the goal is to make the game look good on all of the different systems that it could be played on. And believe it or not, just like with NTSC, they joke about NTSC. I used to think it meant televised standard of communication, like a North American televised standard communication, something like that. And they said what it means is never the same color, right? Because your results will vary. And if you have a TV with the brightness really cranked up, you're going to get kind of more flickery, liney, rolly kind of stuff. If you have a fine-tuned television, then you can really make a game look good. The methods that I use will be thoroughly tested on all manner of CRTs and HD TVs and emulators and systems of that, the flashback systems and whatever I can get to test them on. I even have an original heavy sixer, so trying to get as many things tested for testing, so I know this game's going to look good no matter what you plug it in. But either way, the results, you know, can vary widely. So, and of course, the original heavy sixer it has a little bit different color palette. The Atari 2600 can actually display something like 128 colors. The only problem is the way it draws graphics, the colors are in rows. So that's why most Atari games are very, very low color, one color or single color sprites. Think about Pong. You have an outline, you have two paddles, you have a ball missile kind of interactive component. You have a score. That's about it. And that's what the system was born from. So when I do something like this, it's a lot more complex. I'm actually using methods to create 3-color sprites and the multicolored backgrounds. This is 2600 without any extra anything. You know, Super Chip is from back then. So I guess the DPC Plus, I think DPC was from David Crane, and if I'm not mistaken, it was what they used to make Pitfall. And the chips I use are super chips from back in the day. They're not, you know, fancy modern ARM processor chips or DPC Plus. They're super chips. So they're not DPC Plus chips, but they can do this higher resolution. Now, a lot of games I'm working on are in the middle. They're like, all I need to do is add animation and try to crank them out, and they'll be done. This game is essentially, you know, the interactive animation and walking control, and then all I have to do is just kind of rinse and repeat that process to get as many screens as I can. Okay, so it's really close to being ready. Other games I have that I'm making are just, they're just kind of screens and demos, like timed screens and demos. Another game that's nearly done is Cute Kong. Okay, so Cute Kong is there we go. And you've got your gorilla and the girl's up there dangling and kicking her feet. You got your jump man. Oh, I can't see because the camera's kind of blocking me. I was trying to play it off the view screen of the camera. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to put little squeaky beepy walking sounds to resemble Donkey Kong. Probably going to do a background song that resembles the Donkey Kong background song. Oh crap. And the goal here was to have a more, I wanted, you know, kind of original and authenticity. You know, I wanted original and authentic at the same time. I want this to have missing components from the Coleco Donkey Kong, but also additional components that weren't in any of them. So I've got, in my opinion, a much prettier and much more varied captor there. She's got her hand up like she's yelling for help. She's signaling. She's beautiful. She's got, you know, a pretty dress on and everything. I didn't want my gorilla to look exactly like Donkey Kong. I wanted him to look more like King Kong, kind of more reminiscent of the old black and white kind of the old stop motion kind of, or even more like just a more commanding, less cartoony, definitely not Nintendo-centric kind of IP-driven Donkey Kong. I wanted him to be different. So here we go, okay. Now here would be where he grabs the girl, and then it gets to the next scene where you're whatever, popping rivets, and there are living flame monsters everywhere. And this flame guy here is actually different than what the flame, because the flame monsters on the next level are going to be smaller so that you can kind of jump over them. So I need to program the hammer scene on this. I need to program the, I need to make the barrels vary. Right now there's no, randomness to the barrels. They're just, once they reach the end, then they start back again from the top. So I'm going to be putting a randomizer for the barrels to drop in a more random fashion, so that we'll get more variety, and it will make it a little more complex. As it is now, of course, I've played this enough, I know exactly what to do. And I don't know how this is going to look. Having been recorded, as I'm seeing it, it's more of a soft blue backdrop. There's essentially no flicker or shimmer or anything like that. The most shimmer you get is from the girl, as her flesh tone kind of contrasts the brightness of the dress. I've tried different varieties of this, black screen, brown color for the gorilla, just trying to get as many different possibilities, and I wanted it to look pretty and cute and not really like any other Donkey Kong that's been done. So this is my, and again, none of my games are using modern chips. None of this is done requiring an ARM processor or any kind of like modern anything to get these kind of graphics. This is just me using advanced special methods to get these graphics to happen. And it's something that's unique to the Atari. And it actually lets me do this. So, Mario is a multicolored sprite. The girl is a multicolored sprite. The gorilla is actually part of the background. He's part of the playfield graphics. He's not a sprite. And and as you can see, some of the rules of the Atari are in effect. When you have sprites lining up on the same horizontal plane, they shimmer. And this actually happens on Nintendo, and it happens on other systems. Maybe not on the Master System or the 7800. Those actually have more like arcade graphics processors. Which brings me to another point, that I've programmed things for the 7800, and I was working on a really advanced Double Dragon clone for the 7800 that would really push the boundaries. Now, 7800 dev kits aren't easy to make, and so the possibility of making 7800 games and then being able to use the 2600 Plus to test them, and even sell the games with the intention of them being used on the 7800 Plus, or on the 2600 Plus in its little 7800 mode, is really appealing. That's alluring for me, because it's harder to make 7800 games. I think what it's just called, the Maria, Maria chipset and it's a graphics, kind of like an arcade graphics chip, but it has like an entry code to use it. There's like a special kind of and it's a long code. Now when you program and you're using maybe MAME, something legitimate, not something, most of the 7800 emulators, even if it works on that emulator, it probably won't work on hardware. So if you're doing Homebrew, you need a dev kit, or you need something that's following those rules. MAME actually follows the rules. So if you're using MES, you can actually set up a relatively good, reliable 7800 emulator. And then when you're coding to make a 7800 game, you have to go in there and tell it, oh, this is using a already existing code that Maria will recognize. Otherwise, you're not even going to get past the graphics chip. It won't do anything. Now, with that being said, once you run out of space as far as what you can put on the screen, it's still going to function. There'll just be no graphics. So you'll have something happening there, but you won't be able to see it. It runs out, but it will just keep on going. It'll keep processing. So when I was first programming Double Dragon, I had 4 characters on the screen. I had several things going on the screen. But then when I finally got a chance to send that work to someone with a real dev kit, they said, oh, well, this worked, this didn't work. This worked, but this didn't work. And so I came to that realization. I came to that conclusion that if I'm going to program 7800 games, I either really need and would prefer to have a dev kit. I need an actual dev kit, something piped straight into the 7800 where I can just feed whatever I'm working on right into it, or some kind of emulated system that's truly reliable. And honestly, I would think that this newer 2600 Plus is probably not going to be the more reliable version of the emulator. In that case, it would you could program a game that would work on it but would not work on a real 7800. And I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to make a 7800 cartridge that would only work on one emulated console, emulator-driven console, like what the 2600 Plus will be. But if it is the type of system that will emulate the 7800 very accurately, and that you could use it to test Homebrew, that would be worth getting just in itself, from the standpoint of a homebrew programmer who wants to be able to create for as many systems as I can. So I can program Sega Genesis 7800 and 2600 games. I'm working on them a lot. So I love making 2600 and Genesis are my favorites, but the 7800 really needs more better software. Now, this is going to be one of the best games ever made for the 2600, and I really plan on having games that are better than anything else that's been put out there for that system. So the guy who said, oh, this was awesome, make this for the 2600 Plus Flashback, I'm glad he said that, because it gave me a chance to make this video and kind of show that I do still exist. I am still programming games. It's been years since I've published a game. I really wanted Runout to be published. The game Runout was a labor of love. It was one of the fastest games ever programmed on AtariAge. I finished the game in a matter of a couple of months. I had many users following me and testing the game, and I followed recommendations that they'd given me to improve and to change the game. And it really made me think, this is going to get my foot in the door even more than Titan Axe did, and it's going to be the first game to really use the DPC Plus chipset that they were pushing. I requested from them 10 DPC Plus cartridges so that I could sell the game myself. I was going to put my own art on it and just try to take care of it myself. They refused to respond. And so I had some grumpy, interactions, and then I was finished with them. And when you're working on something like this and you dedicate a lot of your time to it, obviously there are no guarantees. But the idea that somebody is going to disrespect you to that degree, like you're there and people are interacting with you there, but to the people running it, to those code snobs and know-it-alls, you don't exist, is very disrespectful. So I've had a hiatus, and but I never stopped being a coder. I never stopped making these games, and I don't plan on stopping. So yeah, getting Street Fight World out the door is definitely a goal. If you want to leave input, comment or something, tell me. The old graphics were better, don't do these graphics, or I love the new graphics, stick with what you're doing now. All criticism is appreciated, and if you think this looks good or bad, I'd definitely like to know, because should I have the characters larger and chunkier like this, or should I make them thinner like with the SNK game? Now, like I said, the backgrounds are going to be much different than this. These were just placeholder backgrounds that I made to kind of slightly resemble Street Fighter II backgrounds. I really like that background, the Ken, or the Ryu versus Ken kind of a dojo stage or whatever that would be, like a Japanese castle. So yeah, any kind of criticisms or whatever you want to, advice, I guess. I mean, so yeah, I have a lot of work to do to finish this game, and I really want this to be a cartridge that people can buy, and it could be a shot in the arm for 2600. One of the videos I watched about the 2600 plus, the guy said if you're under the age of 40, you're not even playing an Atari 2600. You don't want a 2600, you're not going to buy a 2600 plus. I don't know if I agree with that or not, but if that is valid, if that statement is valid, then I want to be the reason that somebody younger wants one. I want to be the reason that someone says, oh, that game looks pretty cool, I can't believe they're making it for that system. And maybe if I can get this game out the door, people will be more inclined to even buy any kind of Atari system, or even try to get back into Atari. And so yeah, I thank you very, very much for commenting on my my old Street Fight World game, and any kind of input that I can get, I appreciate it. Like, you know, I'm not going to ask you to subscribe because I'm a very small channel, but if you want to subscribe to me, that's great. And if you want to follow my programming adventures along with all the other stuff that I put up on my channel, you know, that'd be great. Of course, when programming on the Atari, you need to be able to test out your programs on different varieties of the system. So this is on a newer kind of CRT, and I also have a couple of other CRT televisions to test it out on with real hardware. A Rainbow Junior, a modded Vader, and a rare Sunnyvale 4 switcher. You have to be able to test your cartridge on several different varieties of system. I also have emulated systems, the HDMI out Flashback 9, I have the portable Flashback system, the Atari 7800, and so also emulators on computers. I test out my programs on as many different varieties as possible. Here you can see I've got Guile moving back and forth. Now these characters are a little bright, and in the final program they're going to be darker, so that so they don't have such a bright presence on the screen. Guile is dark enough. That character's had the color palette darkened a little, so this is more like what you're going to see. And these backgrounds are not what's going to be used in the final game. These were just thrown out there just to have something to work with. When I'm testing my games, I use an Uno cart, or I use the Harmony cart from AtariAge. Now originally my work was using the DPC Plus chipset, which I don't promote now and I don't intend to use. I'm actually using a different chipset, which is the Super Chip. So the Super Chip does these higher resolution backgrounds, and the graphics look really, really good. This is an idea of a medium resolution on the Super Chip. I could do higher resolutions, but what I'm going to end up doing is a higher resolution screen with slightly less color in the end program. Now this works, but the moves aren't programmed in yet. So if I take Guile and just move him here towards the character and hit attack, you can see that it did a little bit of damage. Now the damage is set to respond to one screen at a time, so that's why there's a mistake here where there's a spot at the beginning of the damage. Again, in the final game, there will only be, you know, there now it corrected itself, and you can see the damage, the difference in energy for the two characters. Now I like these screens a lot, but to get done what I want to do, I will probably have to change to a different type of background because I want more gameplay. I want it to be focusing on the different moves and the graphics for the gameplay, and because of that, the background graphics might have to take a hit. So I'm also working on a second fighting game that's going to be, let's see if I can just find it in this list. I'm working on several different games at the same time, and it can kind of make it hard to focus when things happen in your life and you get sidetracked. I found that one of the most difficult things to do when programming is to finish a game, just to actually get a game finally finished to where I'm pleased with the results and I can get it out there. So I'll get an idea and then just kind of throw it out there and and then get sidetracked. And then once you get sidetracked, going in and trying to start working again where you left off. And I've thought of beginning to annotate my work to just try to make it easier to go back in. Because what I usually do, what I've done in the past for the 3 different games that I've done, and one of them published, was I kept a diary and kind of a journal as I was making the games, and that helped a lot because I could just go in and say, oh, this is what variable I'm using here or there, or this is where I am in the game. And I think what I'll do is make a journal and annotate. And the problem with annotating is it eats up more space, it takes up more time, and then when I finally compile the game, I'm going to have to go in there in the however many dozens of pages of code and delete every bit of the annotation before I compile the game for its final usable state. Now this is on a 4-switcher. It's not modded in any way, and you can see that the graphics are pretty much better than anything else that's been done on the Atari before. And this is what I'm working on here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see where I've gotten here. Now these are 3 color sprites and some slightly higher resolution multicolored backgrounds using the super chip. And this is the same little, I guess, engine is what you'd call it, that I'm using for the Street Fight World game, only the characters aren't zoomed. And you can see that this is kind of a representation of Terry Bogard from the SNK games and Maya Shiranui. And so I'm giving them fruity names and stuff. They're not going to be, the exact same characters. And you can get an idea of what they might look like there. Okay. Okay, so these are, there we go, 2 of the games that I'm currently working on. Now this, because it's the same engine, I haven't filled in all the spaces for the SNK characters. So some of the Street Fighter 2 characters are still placeholders there for the sprites. And basically I just made this demo that shows backgrounds, and this is on a timer. It's just running through backgrounds, and it's showing all the different backgrounds with the characters. So I'm going to kind of now, so to test it out, and on the subject of the Atari 2600 Plus, which I intend to buy and also include in my menagerie of systems to test out for the games I'm programming, I hope that they keep it, because I heard they're using Stella, and I hope that they keep it running in the same way that it would run on a normal television with the frame rates, because Stella can have good and bad outcomes with the games. And I use Stella when I program, of course, to test on the system before I move to real hardware. But on certain systems and certain versions of Stella, you're going to get more flicker and more disturbance. And as you can see, there's essentially no flicker here. This is coming right out of the TV screen. When I adjust the colors, my goal is to eliminate any and all flicker, and it can happen. The methods that I use have to be fine-tuned or it can generate flicker. So to make these games, I have I've had cartridges, the PCBs made. I use 32K bank switching methods, some with or without superchip. So all of my games are either going to be 32K bank switching or 32K bank switching with superchip. So the superchip ones will have the higher resolution backgrounds for the most part, and usually look a lot better. But I have other games that I'm also working on, and I can run through some of those right now. One called Ghosts or Bust. Okay. Okay, let's see here if I can get the... Oh, great. There we go. So as you can see, I'm remaking the Ghostbusters game. There's actually a really great version of the game already released for the 2600, but the graphics aren't really good, and so you can see this is really good graphics for the 2600. Probably the best graphics that have ever been on a 2600. And I wanted to really push the envelope of the graphics. The capabilities are much higher than what people have seen on the system. The system has never really been, like a lot of game systems out there, the system has never been used to its fullest potential. And you know, okay, so considering a system like the CDI or the Jaguar, things like that, you could argue that they never saw their full potential. With the Atari, most people would probably believe that it was stressed far beyond its original potential, being created for games like Pong or Combat or things like that. Essentially, an Atari 2600 is supposed to show, you know, like an outline, possibly like a background that's very simple, and you know, two Pong paddles and a Pong ball, or what they call a missile or a ball. But by doing bank switching, you get more ROM space. By doing different techniques, you can get better graphics. So this is using techniques that I've come up with to display better graphics. And as you can see, these are much better graphics than what's ever been shown on a 2600 before. And to do this, I have to very carefully tune the colors to eliminate flicker. So because when I'm doing a special method that I've come up with to show as many colors as possible and to have sprite-like colors. You know that on the 2600 you basically only get single color. This is before anyone even really called them sprites, I guess. I mean, sprites were single color for a long time until on the Atari, until people started coming up with methods. This is a method that, as you can see, generates sprites. It generates 3-color sprites. Now I have demos of so many different screens for this game, and not all the screens can go in the game, not all the stuff can go in the game, but I've come up with lots of different demos of screens, and eventually I'm going to come up with what's going to go in the game and what's not going to be in the game. So if I go through the demo screens and just start with some of them here, like you can see this. This could be the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man scene. Okay. And I'll go ahead and move this a little bit to the side. Now, I'm just calling each of these demos. So let me see, I don't think they're on here. And like I said, I've got a ton of these. I've just come up with so many different demos, and basically once I get the gameplay into the demo, see, here's GB. These are all of the demos for this particular game. And it's been a lot of trial and error to get it where I want it to be. Like here's this was going to be a dance hall, and then on the background I would have people dancing and possibly have a DJ in the middle. These are supposed to be speakers with some lights and stuff, and I was going to have a ghost flying around here. Now I want this to be better. Obviously I want it to be better than the original Ghostbusters game. So that's my goal, is to make it better. Now, like I said though, it's impossible to fit every one of these screens in here. Okay, so here's like a old, like a house in the woods. Oops, that's the music creation program that I used to come up with the background music. Okay, this would be just like a typical building. Now I replaced this with a hospital. I'm going to try to get that up here. Oh, this one's definitely going in. This must go in the final game. It's like a haunted house. It's got a fence, and I'm going to have a ghost or something going around. Now in my game, I'm thinking of having the ghost throw things at you or possibly swoop down to try to attack you. You'll be blasting upward with the proton wand and trying to hit the ghost, while the partner will slide out the trap and trap the ghost. So it's going to play slightly different than the original. There's a subway kind of looking thing. I'm going to probably not use this one. I might actually use this background in one of the fighting games instead. I might go ahead and, because I made like, you know, a few dozen backgrounds just for as many different things as I could use them for. Okay, where am I at here? Okay, then we have the final scene against Gozer. Okay, and that's the Gozer part. You got all 4 Ghostbusters. I'm hoping to have possibly have like animated red dot that goes around the backpack while they're standing there, and this will be a directed beam scene where you direct the beams to different things to try to get to cross the beams, blast to the door, something like that. Okay, so that's the main goal with that scene. And of course there's one with the 2 whatever, devil dog, demon dog things, Zool. So this would be that scene, and you've got the dogs on each side. Got your staircase going up to the door, the pyramid. Okay, this is Atari 2600, just so you know. This is a 2600 using super chip graphics. Now, the DPC Plus is kind of following a trend. This is kind of too flickery. I need to darken the colors. And it's a, you know, kind of a city like New York backdrop. And again, this will have to be changed a little bit. I likely won't use this background in the final game. And there's a big limit. It's a balance. You're balancing animation and characters with backgrounds. And I can either have, you know, a few backgrounds and lots of characters and animation, or I can have tons of backgrounds and not very much characters and animations. And what I would much rather have in this particular case is more characters and animation and less backgrounds. So that's what I'm striving for. I've already done this one. And these are all just, okay, that could be like a, kind of like a store or a bank or something. I thought this would be like a store, and I likely will not use this one. I like how it turned out. It's okay, but it's too shimmery, too complex. So yeah, I want to use as many of them as I can. This was the inside of the Ghostbusters firehouse. It's got the 3 beds and kind of like a ceiling fan and nightstands, and the great big door leading outside. I had considered adding Janine into the game, possibly even having her be a playable character. That's something that happens in the cartoon. Right now we have Peter Venkman and Winston Zeddemore, the two characters. Winston never really had a presence in the game. And of course the Ghostbusters themselves weren't really identified in the video game. This is going to be, you know, more that each character is easily identifiable that you're playing as. Okay, that's the first scene. Now this is the where they first are catching Slimer. You've got the chandelier, the decorative back. I've got a more golden colored version of this where the chandelier is kind of gold colored, and you've got the tabletops and stuff. There's a scene where Peter Venkman pulls the tablecloth off, and the flowers, usually the flowers are still standing, stuff like that. So okay, just bump my cartridge. So yeah, a little different. Okay, this is the driving scene, and this will be the ghost that's coming down. Now in my driving scene, it's going to be slightly different than the original. This was a title screen that I had toyed with, but the title screen is going to have to go. I'm not going to have the title screen. It just eats up too much space. You know, and to get all the graphics in the game, you're sacrificing things. And so one of the first things to go is going to be the title screen. It's most Atari games don't even have a title screen. So you can see here, this is the game, the city. Now in the Atari version, which is one of my favorite Atari games, the ghosts come up from the bottom of the screen, unlike the computer version of the game. In the computer version of the game, they're coming in from the four sides of the screen, like here. And when they meet to the center of the screen, then they will raise the PKE meter. Okay. Then when the PKE meter, now this you can see, notice how I'm speeding up. Now in my version of the game, you will speed up to catch up with the ghosts. So you'll see a ghost moving around up here, and then you'll drive towards him to suck him into the ghost vacuum. Okay. And I'm going to be adding siren sound effects, music, background music, and it's going to be a variant of the whatever, like Saving the Day song from where the scenes of the Ecto-1 in the movie are in the original movie. So this, we've got this all together. The first scene, you're going to fight Slimer and catch him. After that, of course, you'll go back to the original title screen, and then move around and go to a different place. And so yeah, I've been working on a lot of games. Another game that I'm working on that's nearly complete. Let's see if I can, I don't know, I've done this in a while. I need to find all my games here. Here we go. I'll just go here and find it real quick. Here we go. This is one that I'm working on. Okay, this is, I have to back up the camera a little bit. I'm making a series with cute in the title. K-Y-E-W-T, cute. And this will be one of them, and it's called Cute Kong. And now we're getting kind of lines in the screen now. Okay, get it closer, maybe it'll get rid of some of those lines. But you got the captured girl and the gorilla, got your little Jumpman guy. And as you can see, this is a playable demo now. This uses Super Chip. Oh. Now, I wanted a Donkey Kong game that was easy, but, you know, fun, and maintained some of the characteristics of the original that were lost in the 2600 Coleco translation. For instance, there's no flame chasing you in the Coleco one. There's only 2 levels. So this one I plan on having, 3 levels, and having, or at least 2 with the extra effects. Darn it. And I need to add background music and sound effects. The climbing is slower than on the arcade game. I might speed up the climbing a little bit, and the timing of it is more precise. It's harder to jump over the barrels. You have to make sure the jump is pretty much perfect to make it over the barrels. So it's more challenging as far as jumping over the barrels goes, and timing the climbing parts can be a little more challenging because you're there we go. Now I've only got this first scene programmed, so right here where he's reached the top, this would trigger him picking up the character again. The flame stops here, and I might program it to go back and forth to essentially block off the ability to descend after it's reached this point. Okay, and if you hit the flame, it actually burns your character instead of just killing you off. And I'm also going to make the barrels a little more random. Right now, as you can see, once a barrel reaches the summit, then it drops down. So that won't be how the final program is. The barrels will be more random. There'll be like a random pause before the barrels can reenact, and then that will stagger the barrels as they descend. And so another cute game I'm making is going to be Cute Volleyball, and that's going to have characters playing volleyball and just cool beach kind of. It's going to be called Cute Beach and not Cute Volleyball. It's going to be called Cute Beach, KWI or KYEWT, Cute Beach, and it's going to have volleyball, maybe hopping games. I want it to be kind of like the Extreme Beach Volleyball. Like maybe I might make it so you can buy gifts or something like that to exchange to the other players. Just a fun game. I'm trying to really push the boundaries of what the 2600 is capable of. Here we can see the PCBs I have. This is a super chip PCB. Okay, then here we have a 32K bank switching PCB. Here are the chips. Here's a super chip ZIF socketed PCB and a 32K bank switching ZIF socketed PCB. ZIF, by the way, means zero insertion force, in case you have ever heard that term and were wondering what that might mean. When people say I have ZIF sockets, it's zero insertion force because it doesn't take any force to plant the chip down inside there. And that lets me test chips before I want to put them on a final PCB. So then I have other cartridges. These are for Sega games that I'm working on. And here's the prototype for TitanAxe. Before it was actually made, I had a prototype sent to me. And here's the TitanAxe from AtariAge. Okay, then we have, you can probably barely see it, but that's a modded Vader 4-switcher. That's for testing games on on modded systems, so that if a person has a modded system, I can get an idea of what they might see. My primary 4-switcher for testing. And then I have this Rainbow Junior down here, and that's got my Harmony card in it for testing. And this Panasonic more modern CRT. Here I have another older CRT television, more of a vintage style, and that's coupled with the 7800, so that I can test out, because it has very, very slight differences with 2600 games. So I can go ahead and just turn all this on. There we go. Whoop. There we go. I don't know why it's doing that. There we go. So we can see there, and the color's not really doing that great. It looks kind of chunky. I think it could be the back is, there we go. Like these old things, they get flitty. And there we go, that's very good now, okay. Better anyway, and it looks really blue on this LED, so I'm really not sure what that's going to look like. And in front of me it doesn't look bad, there's a little bit of artifacting. You can kind of get an idea of you know, how that is. And so I guess some people might still have these older television sets, so I'm testing on those too. I'm going to make sure to test on pretty much anything you might have. I'm trying to test my game on it before I make a final cartridge.